Hello everyone. In the last class, we just learned how to apply the four basic scheduling algorithms onto a specific scheduling problem and to calculate the turnaround time for each job, including the average turnaround time. Uh, so about those four basic algorithms, we need to take a brief review about their basic idea. So for the FCFS, first come, first served, it's just choose the it's gonna choose the uh, job according to the order they arrived at the system. So the first one arriving at the system will get into CPU to finish its job. And this algorithm is a non-preemptive algorithm. For the second one, shortest job first, it's also a non-preemptive algorithm. And this for this algorithm, it's just it choose the job with the shortest execution time every time. Every time when the scheduler is running to select the process to run next, it's just check the estimated execution time of all the jobs on the waiting queue and choose the one with the shortest execution time. So we just illustrate you how to solve this scheduling problem based on the time axis on CPU. So if you just list all the conditions, list all the information in the scheduling problem on this time axis, you can see from this, hold on. So from this simple figure, we can see that there are 5 jobs arriving at time 0, 1, 3, 4, 5 respectively, and each job has its estimated execution time. And according to this information, we can schedule them with FCFS, also SJF, and also you can use the scheduling algorithm for interactive systems to get a solution for this same scheduling problem. You just list all the processes on the time axis on CPU, and you can, for example, for this case, if we choose round robin, you just first, and if you set the quantum is 1, you just let each job run for 1 minute, and then for the next round, D will just exit the system, and you can let the rest 4 jobs to let the 4 rest jobs, yes, run for the next round of 1 minute. So first, let me get through this very quickly for you to make you recall the process to applying the these 2 basic algorithms on the specific scheduling problem. So for this case, I just changed the information a little bit. But anyway, the method is the same. So you just put the jobs onto the CPU axis, and you can get the completion time for each job. And if you get the difference between the completion time, between the submission time and completion time, you can get the corresponding turnaround time for each job. And you can easily get the average turnaround time, and that is the basic criterion, yes, for us to evaluate if this algorithm is better than the others. So for this case, you can see SJF can get shorter turnaround time, and so for this case, SJF is better than FCFS. And for this case, if you try to apply round robin or even priority algorithm, you can try it after the class with the different setting on length of a quantum. The solution for this same scheduling problem is different. So for the assignments of the chapter 2, we just set a fixed slot for the quantum, and if you want to finish it in advance, you can check the assignments after the class and finish it before the deadline for the chapter 2. I think we're gonna finish chapter 2 in the next class, so I hope you can submit your homework, the first homework, next Monday, because we're gonna have 3 more classes, yes, before the National Day holiday, right? So, but the deadline is not decided yet. I'm gonna post the deadline for the first homework in the WeChat group. In case you want to finish the homework in advance, you can try it after the class with the 4 given algorithms with the given information. You just try to put the 5 or 4 jobs or processes onto the CPU axis, and you get the exact completion time, and you calculate the turnaround for each job, and then calculate the final average turnaround time. So these are for FCFS and SJF. Also, we learned some other algorithms, but we don't illustrate with the time axis. We just introduced the basic idea. So for the shortest remaining time next, it's very different from the first 2 algorithms, FCFS and SJF. Of course, this algorithm it's preemptive algorithm. It's a preemptive algorithm. It means some jobs on the waiting queue or some processes on the waiting queue, it can just replace the current process in CPU, no matter if this current process want to stay in CPU for a longer time. But how, so the basic idea for this algorithm is to choose the process whose remaining runtime is the shortest. So every time when there is a new job arriving at the system, you have to run the scheduler to calculate the remaining runtime for each job on the waiting queue, including the remaining runtime for the current process in CPU, and compare them to choose the one with the shortest remaining runtime, and that one will be the next process who stays in CPU to run for a while. Okay, so this is the basic idea for shortest remaining time next. It's a preemptive algorithm, and you have to understand the difference between non-preemptive and preemptive algorithms. So that's those 3 algorithms. They are mostly for the batch systems. And for the interactive systems, we suggest you to use round-robin scheduling, priority scheduling, and there are a lot of other options on the scheduling algorithms in active systems. But we just need you to master the first two, round-robin and priority scheduling algorithms. It means we just need you to apply these two scheduling algorithms on a specific scheduling problem. For the others, you just need to understand their basic idea. It's enough. So for the round-robin scheduling, it's very simple too. It's just make the processes in the system take turns to use a fixed time slot of CPU. So it means if you set the quantum as 1 minute or 2 minutes, and so on. So for each process getting the chance to use CPU, they can run in CPU for only 1 minute or 2 minutes, equal to each process. So you can say the length of the quantum is very important because you can't set the length too long. If it's a big value, the length of the quantum cannot be say too big, because it's too big, then the overhead is decreased, but it also means all the processes on the waiting queue, they have to wait for a much longer time to get the turn to use CPU next. So you can't set the length as a very small value, because if it's too small, then you can see the overhead is too high, because we know that we need the process switch needs some time to finish its job, to store the information for the last process, and to recover the information for the next process in the CPU. So all of these operations take it needs some time to finish all these operations. And those time, if you set the quantum as a very small value, it means the useful ratio of the time is very low. So you have to remember this basic value of the about the length of quantum. It's usually set around 20 to 50 milliseconds. So this is all about the round-robin scheduling. When you try to apply this scheduling algorithm onto a specific scheduling problem, as we required in the assignments, you just need to put each each job or each process onto the CPU axis, one after another, and you have to notice, you have to pay specific attention to the completion time, because each job, each process, they have different execution time. So maybe some jobs just finish it, some processes just exit the system after the first round or the second round. So you need to notice the completion time for each job, and calculate their turnaround times respectively. So this is all about round-robin scheduling. And if speaking of the priority scheduling, the basic idea is simple too, because we just need every time when we run the scheduler to choose a process to use CPU next, we just choose the one with the highest priority. So you can say each process in the system will be assigned a priority. So you can see if each process has a fixed priority, it means every time the process with the highest priority can get CPU. And for those processes with lower priority, it how to say, it's low possible for them. They don't have much chance to get into CPU to run for a while, because maybe there are always some processes with higher priority, so they maybe it's hard for them to get the CPU, and they're gonna have no chance to run any instructions, and that's not unfair. And we just emphasize the basic three goals for all the systems. We need to make sure the fairness, the policy enforcement, and so on. So for this situation, we have two basic ways to fix the problem. Because if we just set the priority of the process statically, then the processes with lower priority, they have little chance to get CPU, and it's unfair for them. So we have these two ways to fix this problem. Hold on. Oh, sorry. Let's check the first one and the second one in more details. Okay, we can set a quantum for each processes. For each process, it means even though the process has the highest priority, it can execute the instructions for a fixed time slot. After the quantum for this process with the highest priority is used up, this process has to get out of the CPU. Okay, so this is the first way to fix the problem. And also, for the first way, you can see we don't change the priority of the processes. We just set a quantum for each process. And for the second way, its basic idea is they don't set any limitation on the running time for each process. There is no quantum for each process, but they can change the priority dynamically. Okay, so these are two two basic ways from different perspectives. So first, let's dive into the first way. We can set a quantum for each process, and so even though some processes they have higher priority, they finally they're gonna use up their quantum finally, and then the processes with lower priority will finally get the chance to get into CPU to run for a while. But if we because there are a lot of processes in the system, maybe there are over 100 processes simultaneously, and if we need to set the different priority for over 100 processes, it's just the algorithm is just over complicated. So we can modify the algorithm a little bit. So we just classify the processes in the system into different classes. So in the same class, they have the same priority. Okay, so you can check this figure. You can check this figure. In this system, we just set four classes. It means all the processes in the same system, they have four different priorities. The setting, maybe a process can be in any of these classes if they are in this class, it means it has the lowest priority. If the process is in the first class, it means it has the highest priority. So in this way, we don't need to set a totally different priority number for each single process. We just group them into a few classes. In each class, all the processes have the same priority, and of course they are on the queue. And each time the scheduler is running, it's gonna choose a process from the class with the highest priority. And if there is no process for the in the class with highest priority, it can try another process in the class with the lower priority. So it means for this case, the scheduler will choose a process from this queue. First, if this queue is empty, then it's try a process on this queue. And if this queue is also empty, it's just try the next one until the final queue on this in this system. So this is very easy to implement compared to set different priority for each single process, and each process will be allocated with the same length of quantum. So each process, no matter you are the process in the first class or in the fourth class, as long as you get the CPU, you just run for the same time. Okay, so you have the same setting on the quantum to use the CPU. This is the basic idea to set a quantum for the modification on the priority scheduling. And of course, we have another option. We can just we don't set the limitation for each process we don't set the limitation on the using time of the CPU time. We don't set the quantum for each single process. It can use the process can use CPU as long as it wants, unless there is another process which is allocated, which is assigned a higher priority than the current process. So it means the process in the system, their priorities can be changed dynamically all the time. So it's very important to decide how to change the priorities, right? So we have a lot of ways to change the priorities of all the processes in the system. We can choose to decrease the priority of the current running process at each clock tick. It means we don't change the priorities of the processes on the waiting queue. We just decrease the priority of the currently running process. It means even though we don't set the quantum for the processes, but if we decrease the priority of the currently running process, it means finally this currently running process will get a lower priority than a certain process in the waiting queue. And when it's happening, then the the current process with lower priority will get out of the CPU and let that new new how to say let that process with the highest priority on the waiting queue to get into CPU to run for a while. And you can see after a while, this current process, after this process runs a lot of instructions, as we just set the priority of the current process will is decreased at each clock tick. So as time goes by, the priority of the current process will be finally set as a lower value than a certain process in the a certain process on the waiting queue, right? So this is the way to prevent a certain process from using the CPU indefinitely. Yes, it cannot, and no process can use CPU forever. Finally, it will get out of the CPU. So this is uh, 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 how to say, this is the way it works in a simple with a simple method, because it just needs to change the priority of one single process. And of course, we can choose another much more complicated way. We can set the priority of a process to 1 over f after the process run. So it means you need to track the the execution time for each process in the CPU, in the system. Here, f means the fraction of the last quantum that a process used. We need to give you an example to understand this way. So we assume a process just used only 1 millisecond. We just said we suppose the quantum is 50 milliseconds, and this process it just used only 1 millisecond, and then maybe it's blocked by an I/O operation. Maybe it's blocked by the access to critical region. Anyway, this process just runs only 1 milliseconds, even though the quantum is set as 50 milliseconds. Then we can set the priority for this process as 50. You can use this expression to calculate the priority. And for another process that run 25 milliseconds, because it's just used half of the quantum, so its priority is set as 2. And if the process just used up the quantum before it leaves the CPU, then this process just gets priority 1. So every time when the process is every time when the process runs for a while in the CPU, after it leaves the CPU, after the process gets out of the CPU, the priority will be dynamically set by this expression. We'll just calculate the value for each process leaving the CPU, and use that information for the next round of scheduling. So anyway, we have a lot of ways to dynamically modify the priorities for the processes in the system, and no matter which way is adopted, you can say priority scheduling. It's how to say, it's suitable for some processes which need to be how to say, need to be handled in a special way. Sometimes process is much more important than the others, we're gonna use this priority scheduling. Of course, if you choose round robin scheduling, you can see some processes with higher importance, they cannot get the demanded CPU time. So this priority scheduling, it has its own application scenarios. And basically, these two priority and round robin scheduling algorithms, that's all you need to master. You need to grasp about the application, about how to use them, how to apply them onto a concrete scheduling problem. And for the other algorithms, I'm gonna introduce here. We just need to understand the basic idea, and it's enough for this for the following a few algorithms. Okay, so the first one is multiple queues. Here you can see the processes in the system are classified into multiple queues, multiple classes too, just as the similar way to modify the priority scheduling. If you recall, the first way to set a quantum, we can just group the processes in the system into 4 classes or even more. But here, the big difference between these multiple queues and that different classes with a fixed quantum, the big difference between these two methods, between these two algorithms, is the quantum is different. The fixed time slot to use CPU is set differently. Okay, so in multiple queues, you can see in the highest class, the processes can run for only 1 quantum, and the processes in the next highest class can run for 2 quanta, and the processes in the next one can run for 4 quanta, etc. So it means the processes in the 4th highest class can run for 2 to the power of 3 quanta, and the processes in the nth highest class, it can run for 2 to the power of n minus 1 quanta. It means if the process is in the higher class, it can only use CPU for less time. If the process is in the class with how to say, it is in the lower class, it can run for a longer time. So this is the basic idea for the multiple queues. With this algorithm, you can see if a process it just needs to needs to run for a couple or only a few instructions to handle some I/O operations. For example, if this is an I/O bounded process. It's very how to say, it's very suitable for this kinds of I/O bounded processes to run in the system with multiple queues algorithms, because it just need every time it needs to handle the I/O operations, it just needs a very short time to run some instructions, and every time after it runs from the because every time when it needs to run for a while, it will be put in the highest class first, and when the time the time assigned to this process is used up, then the process will be put onto the queue into the next highest class. So for those I/O bounded processes, in most cases, they just need to run for one quantum to run only a few instructions, and then they're gonna go to deal with those I/O operations. So it doesn't need to wait for a long time as they do with the FCFS algorithm. Right? So this is fair for them for those I/O bounded processes, and for those compute bound processes. Of course, the only one quantum is not enough for them to finish all the job, to finish all the execution of the instructions, right? So, but it's also fair. It's also not so unfair for those compute bounded processes, because if they can't finish their jobs in the higher class, they'll be moved on to the lower class, and in the lower class, the next time when they get CPU, they can have much longer time to run much more instructions. So there's multiple queues. They can they can be applied to both compute and I/O bounded processes. And if you are interested in the concrete execution of the application of this multiple queue algorithm, you can read through this example. If a process needs to compute for maybe over 100 quanta or 200 quanta, you can calculate how many times it needs to be scheduled by the scheduler to get how many times it needs to get into CPU. So in this way, I think this multiple queues it's suitable for hands-off processes, but it's not so simple as those four basic algorithms. And for the operating system, sometimes the performance is not the most important thing. Maybe sometimes the simpler, the better. So you can see in some modern operating system, even though we know that this algorithm cannot provide the best performance, but we still choose that one because it's simple enough. If it's simple enough, it means we don't need to run much instructions for the scheduler. It means we don't need too much time for the process switch for the scheduling for the operating system. We can put more CPU time onto the application programs. So anyway, it's about the balance. We just need to focus on the basic idea of the algorithm. Okay, let's come back to this, the next algorithm, which is about the shortest process next. Oh, it's very familiar, right? Because we just learned SJF, shortest job first, and here it's called shortest process next, because for the job, as long as it gets CPU, it can just run all the instructions. But for the process in the interactive system, for example, if this process is relevant to Word, each time the users type something through the keyboard, it's just like a short job. A short job is generated by this common user. So you can see interactive process generally. We can view the interactive process as a how to say as a a list of a lot of short jobs, and each job is to wait for comment and execute comment and wait and execute. So each comment, each execution of a command can be viewed as a very short job for this process with a lot of interactions. So when we choose this algorithm, we just execute if there are a lot of processes on the waiting queue. We need to choose we need to choose the process which needs the shortest time to finish the execution of next command. So the most difficult problem is how to determine, how to know, how to find the shortest one. We have no idea before we have no idea how long this command needs before we finish, before we actually finish the execution of that command, right? We can know the execution time exactly before this command is executed. It's very hard to estimate the shortest, the possible execution time for each mini job. So we have some ways to how to say simulate or to estimate the possible execution time for the processes on the waiting queue. If you are interested in this part, you can check the textbook and even search something on internet. But this is not our focus, so we just jump over these parts. You just need to know there is an algorithm called shortest process next, and it just chooses the shortest mini job or the shortest process with for the next command. And for the next one, it's called guaranteed scheduling. So with this algorithm, the scheduler will make some promises to the processes or to the users. For example, if there are 3 processes in the system, and the scheduler can make a promise that each process can get 1/3 of CPU time. And this is the promise from the scheduler. And then the scheduler will keep its promise by keeping track of how much CPU time each process just uses, and then to compare the real execution time to compare the difference between the real CPU time, execution time, and the promised CPU time, and to find the process with the longer one, with a big difference between the real execution time and the promised execution time. So this is a basic idea of guaranteed scheduling. It means you just make some promises and you just keep your promises by checking the difference between the promise and the real used time. And the next one is called lottery scheduling. Oh, this is very similar to lottery. It means each process in the system can get some lottery tickets. So maybe some processes can get more lottery tickets and some processes just get fewer lottery tickets. And when the scheduling decision needs to be made, when the scheduler is running, it just choose the scheduler just choose a lottery ticket randomly. So which process is holding the chosen lottery ticket, that process will be the one to use CPU next. Very simple, right? But if you want to apply this algorithm, there are a lot of issues to be considered. Uh, for example, how many tickets a process need to be can be assigned. If this process you think it's more important, you can assign more tickets to that process, right? And also, um, sometimes the operating system can allow uh, the processes exchange their tickets if they wish. So this is a very useful operation because sometimes maybe two processes they need to cooperate to finish the a single job. They need to cooperate, and if one of them is blocked, then the lottery tickets assigned to that blocked process can be how to say how can be sent to the cooperative process, so that cooperative process can have more chance to get CPU, and so the two cooperative processes they can finish their job as sooner. Okay, so this is the basic idea about lottery scheduling. And the last one we need to learn about is called fair share scheduling. So for all the other scheduling algorithms you can see, they are all about the processes. We just consider how much CPU time needs to be assigned allocated to which process at which point. So that's they are all about the processes. And this fair share scheduling, it just considers something about different users, because usually um, uh, it's not so common for PC for personal computers, uh, because when we use PC or smartphones, we are the only user on this machine, right? But sometimes there are some computers with multiple users, and different users can submit multiple processes, submit different jobs. If you take the fairness among the processes into account, if you take only the fairness among the processes into account, you just maybe you just make it unfair for the different users. Just suppose this case, we can suppose user one starts up user one just has 9 processes, and user two just has only one process. So if the CPU is allocated to the 10 processes in the system equally, you can see user one will get 90% of the CPU and user 2 gets only 10% of it. And this is unfair if we check this from the perspective of users. So we can adopt this fair share scheduling by try to make each user has the similar each user will get how to say get similar fraction of the CPU time. For example, we can make user one and user two. Each of them, we can make these two users have 50% of CPU time. So it means if user 1 has 4 processes to run and user 2 has only 1 process, you can see user the process E from user 2 will get more CPU compared to the other processes, because process E is the only process owned by user 2. So this is if we choose round robin scheduling for these two users with different number of the processes, this is a possible scheduling uh, execution order. If we choose round robin scheduling, it means A from the yellow the yellow part is for user 1 and the white part is for user 2. So you can see E is executed much more than the other processes. Maybe you can you think that this is unfair. It's unfair for the other 4 processes, but it's fairer for user 1 and user 2. If we stand from the perspective of users, we can choose this fair share scheduling. Of course, it's not fixed that each user will get the equal CPU time. Maybe they can get different CPU time according to the maybe some users are administrators or some users are just guests. You can allocate different shares to different quanta for different users. Anyway, it's just details about this fair share scheduling. We just need to know that fair share scheduling is about the fairness among users, but not fairness among processes, and that's enough. So basically, we just take a quick look about uh, some scheduling algorithms for interactive systems, and for the 4 most important algorithms, we just spent a lot of time to explain on explaining them and on applying them to a specific algorithm, on a specific problem. And you can try to finish the assignments for this chapter 2 after the class and try to figure out how to calculate the turnaround by yourself. If you have any problem, you can discuss with me after the class. Okay, so next we're gonna move on to the algorithms for the not actually algorithms for real-time system. We don't talk about any specific algorithms for real-time system. We just need to learn something about the scheduling for real-time system. So you already know that real-time system can be divided into hard real-time and soft real-time system. Because for the hard real-time, if the deadlines are not met, something fatal will just happen. Maybe just you may lose a lot of money or a lot of resources. But for the soft real-time systems, missing an occasional deadlines is acceptable. For example, if you are playing some music, if this time it's just the music is not played smoothly, you can you can just make some other processes except and you try to play it again. Maybe you just put more CPU resources or memory resources on the music player. You can get you can try or you can play it smoothly the next time. So the real-time systems can be divided into hard real-time and soft real-time. This is a basic sense, basic common sense for you to understand. After you understand these two terms, two concepts. You should also know that the real-time system can be further classified as periodic or aperiodic. It means periodic. It means that the events will happen every 1 minute or 2 minutes. It's happened periodically. And if this event, you have no idea when this event happens, it's just this kind of events, they just happened randomly, then it must be some aperiodic events. And we just need to learn some more about periodic, about the real-time system with periodic events. So if a system, if we suppose there are m periodic events in the system, and each event occurs with period pi, and then and this event, actually this event can be viewed as a process, and this process requires ci to execute some instructions. Then we need to use this expression to decide if the real-time system is schedulable. So if this condition is satisfied, then this system is schedulable. If it's not, then no matter which algorithm you are applying, this system is not schedulable. It means at least one event cannot meet its deadline. So we just need to understand how to use this condition to check if a real-time system with some periodic events, if this real-time system is schedulable. We just need to understand this method. It's enough. So here we just take this, make this a very simple example. We suppose there are 3 periodic events with periods of 100, 200, and 500 milliseconds. It means these 3 events happens every 100 milliseconds, or 200 milliseconds, or 500 milliseconds. And these 3 periodic events, they require 50 milliseconds or 30 milliseconds and 1 millisecond of CPU time to run some instructions, to handle some issues, to meet the deadline. So it means the first event needs 50 milliseconds of your CPU time to run some instructions to meet the deadline in 15 milliseconds. So we can say this, we just suppose this case, and this case for this system is schedulable because we just try to apply this expression. We just calculate the sum of these expressions. We for the first event, the period is 100, and the calculation time, actually the C means CPU time, and the CPU time it needs is 50 milliseconds. So you can see 50, 100. Okay, so the first item is 0.5, right? The numerator is 50 milliseconds, is 50, and the denominator is 100. So finally, this answer for the first item is 0.5, and the second item is the numerator is C2. The the second item, the numerator for the second item is 30, and the denominator for the second time is 200, right? So the result is 0.15, right? And you just calculate the third item the similar way, and you get the sum is less than 1. It means this is for this system, the CPU has enough time to run all the instructions for all these 3 periodic events. But if we suppose there is a fourth event and its period is 1 second, it means 1000 milliseconds, and then the system will remain schedulable if it does not need more than 150 milliseconds to execute its instructions. If the CPU time, if the C4 for this fourth event is greater than 150 milliseconds, you can say the sum will just be greater than 1. Then it cannot satisfy this condition. It means this system is not schedulable anymore. So you need to understand how to use this condition to check if a real-time system is schedulable. Of course, here we just suppose this real-time system just needs to handle a lot of periodic events, because we need to, based on this information, to calculate the value, the sum, and compare it with 1. So this is about the real-time system. If it's schedulable, you need to know how to judge. And for by now we just talk about a lot of stuff relevant to scheduling, and all of these methods are or algorithms are relevant to the processes. It means when we talked about those algorithms, we just suppose the process is the basic scheduling unit for the operating system. It means the scheduler just needs to decide which process will be selected to run in CPU next. But actually, in modern operating systems, threads are very popular. Threads are adopted in almost all the modern operating systems. So when the scheduling relevant to when threads are involved in scheduling, we need to consider more factors. But we don't put much attention onto this topic. If you are interested, you can check the last 2 parts of section 4. You can see sometimes for the operating system, it might be unaware of some information relevant to the thread scheduling. So this kinds of information should be handled by the process, but not the scheduler. And also, we have two different ways to implement the threads inside a process. Sometimes the threads in the operating system is not aware of the threads inside a process. Sometimes it knows, partially. So if you are interested in this thread scheduling, you can check this part later. So that's all about the scheduling. We just mentioned that for chapter 2, basically you can see there are 3 very important topics. The first one is the states of the process. The second one is the IPC problem. And specifically, the second topic is about how to solve the synchronization problem, also including the mutual exclusion problem. And the third topic is about the scheduling. So for this part, for this section, you need to master how to apply the 4 basic algorithms onto a specific scheduling problem and get the right scheme and the right scheduling results and turnaround time. And next, we're gonna move on to the last section we're gonna introduce for this chapter. It's about some classical IPC problems. And before we dive into this part, we need to take a brief review about the semaphores we just mentioned a lot of times in section 3. In section 3, we just know IPC problems is IPC means you need to handle 3 issues: mutual exclusion, synchronization, and message passing. You need to send messages between 2 processes or among some processes. And among those 3 issues, synchronization is the most important one, because sometimes you can see the mutual exclusion. It's just a special case of synchronization. And how to solve a synchronization problem, we suggest you to understand totally about semaphores. Semaphores are very useful to handle a lot of different types of synchronization problems. And we just discussed one of them, the PC problems. Yes, producer-consumer problems. That kind of problems is a typical IPC problem, is a typical synchronization problem. If you recall the solution on this PC problem, you can see we just set 3 semaphores to control the whole situation, the control the whole synchronization. We use mutex. We use mutex, this semaphore, to control the multiple processes. They get into their own critical regions respectively at different time. So mutex is usually set as 1. The initial value of mutex is usually set as 1. And also we have other 2 semaphores called full and empty. So each semaphore, you need to recall the basic meaning, basic definition or the framework of the semaphore. The semaphore consists of 3 parts: an integer value, which can be positive, 0, or negative, and the down and up operations on this semaphore. These are 3 basic parts inside the semaphore. So if we just set a semaphore to solve some synchronization problems, the first thing we need to know is to recognize, is to clarify which resource the semaphore is representing. Okay, so we recall the solution to producer and consumer problem. There are 3 semaphores, and the mutex semaphore is representing the resource or the access right to get into critical region. It's used, the mutex is used to control the access to critical region. So the resource corresponding to mutex corresponding to this semaphore means the resource of access right to critical region. If you want to get into your own critical region, you need to apply, you need to request that resource. You need to request that only access rights. And there is only one chance, there is only one permission for the access to critical region. So the initial value of mutex is 1. And if there are more than one processes want to get into their critical regions at the same time, you will see the second and the later process, the processes request later, request the mutex, request the corresponding resource later, they will be put on to the waiting queue on the mutex, because after they do the down operations to request the only the unique access permission to critical region, they'll find the integer value of this semaphore of this mutex is not 0 or a positive, it's a negative value. And if the value of semaphore is negative, it means there are some processes waiting on this semaphore, waiting for the current process, which is using the resources, the demanded resource. So these blocked processes, they are waiting for this process with the requested resource to return the resource back to the system. And when the process with that resource uses up, or it doesn't need to use the resource anymore, this process needs to do the up operation to return the corresponding resource back to the system. So basically, the 3 parts of the semaphores, the first, the value just indicates if there are unavailable resources in the system, or if there are unblocked processes waiting on the queue on this semaphore. And the second part, the down operation, is used to request the corresponding resource. And it has 2 results to do the, if you do the down operation, there are 2 results. In the first case, you can just get what you want. You can get the requested, the demanded resource and directly, and you just go to use it. The second case, in the second case, you can't get it directly because it's already allocated to another process. So you have to wait for that process to return it back to the system. And that process we're gonna do the up operation, the third part of the semaphore. We're gonna do this up operation to return the corresponding resource back to system. Inside the operation, it will check if there is any process on the waiting queue of the semaphore relevant to the semaphore. If so, then one process on that waiting queue will be waking up. So these are the 3 parts: the value, the meaning of value, and the down operations to request resource, and the operations to the operation on the semaphore to return the corresponding resource. And if we want to use this framework, use this semaphores to handle any kind of synchronization problems, you need to you need to check. You need to clarify that how many semaphores you need, and uh, what what's the meaning, or what's the uh, what each semaphore is representing, what kind of which resource, or what kind of resource, or that each which resource this all of these semaphores are representing. So back to that PC problem, the producer and consumer problem, you can see there are three semaphores, and we just mentioned that the first semaphore called mutex is representing the resource of the access permission. There is only one, so the initial value of mutex is 1. And the second semaphore relevant to the PC problem is called full. And the full is representing the resources which are the items in the shared buffer. And in the beginning, the initial value of full of this semaphore is 0, because in the very beginning there is no item in buffer. And the third semaphore relevant to PC problems, PC problem is empty, right? Empty means the available slots in the buffer. So this semaphore is used to representing the resources, the resource which are available slots in the shared buffer, and the initial value of empty is 100, or any number you can set it. So we just take a thorough review about semaphores, which is used to handle kinds of synchronization problems, and we also take a review about how to use how to set semaphores to handle the typical PC problems. And for the last section, we're gonna learn 2 more classical IPC problems, and you'll see we're gonna illustrate how to use semaphores, this very useful framework to handle the typical dining philosophers problem and read-writer problems. These 2 problems are 2 very classical IPC problems, just as producer and consumer problems. And if you choose to work as a software engineer, you might meet some you might need to handle some situations, some issues which has similar factors or descriptions relevant to these 3 kinds of classical IPC problems. Of course, there are some other classical IPC problems, but if you can understand how to use semaphores to handle these 3 classical IPC problems, PC problem, dining philosophers problem, and reader-writer problem, I believe you can solve the other IPC problems too. So now let's just check the problem description of dining philosophers problem. Okay, this dining philosophers problem is very famous and very important for you to grasp the semaphores to grasp this method. If you anyway, so if you tell somebody you learned this course, you learned the operating systems, there are a lot of basic concepts and and terms you need to know, including process states, including the address space, also the dining philosophers and PC problem. They are some they are just kind of some common sense for any students who learned the operating systems. Okay, so at least you need to understand this problem description, and based on it, you need to understand the solutions. We're gonna provide you two solutions for this problem. So first, let's describe the problem. We suppose there are five philosophers sitting around a circular table, and each philosopher, you can view each philosopher as a process. They just need to do three kind of things. They can think, and when they feel hungry, they need to pick up the forks and they eat. And after they eat, they need to put back the forks onto the table. So basically, the philosopher needs to think, eat, and get and the third thing he needs to do is to pick up and put back the forks. Okay, so you can see here from this figure there are only 5 forks and there are 5 philosophers, and each philosopher needs 2 forks to eat. So it means this circled fork is shared by this this philosopher and this philosopher, right? We suppose the philosopher just sits in front of the spaghettis. There are 5 plates of spaghetti. Spaghetti is not the shared resource because each philosopher has a plate of spaghetti. The spaghetti belongs to a certain philosopher. This is not a shared resource, but the fork is the shared resource. Each fork is a shared resource, shared by the philosophers sitting in the left side and the right side. So here we can see there are risk conditions, right? Because each philosopher is viewed as a process, and there are 5 processes. The 5 processes, they are sharing 5 forks. Each fork is shared by 2 philosophers. So 5 processes need to share these 5 forks to eat the plate of spaghetti in front of him. This is a basic problem, and if we make more analysis on this problem, you can see the philosopher needs just to think and eat. Between thinking and eating, the philosopher needs to take this forks, and after the philosopher finish eating, it needs to put down the 2 forks onto the tables, right? So we suppose for this semester, we name it maybe 0. There are 5 philosophers we name it 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So there are 5 processes, and we just name the fork. We just give each fork a number so we can identify them. We just number the forks like this. So it means process 0 needs to get fork 0 and fork 1 to eat the spaghetti, right? So before that, before the process 0 starts eating spaghetti, it needs to take fork 0 and fork 1. But fork 0 is shared by process 0 and process 4. So it means that when process 0 wants to pick up fork 0, fork 0 might be holding, might is held by process 4, right? And also fork 1 held might be held by process 1 too. So at this time you can say process 0 cannot take fork 0. Also neither process 0 can take neither for fork 0 and nor fork 1. So process 0 needs to wait. And as long as there is something to wait, there is some event to wait, it means there is a synchronization problem. Process 0 needs to wait. Process 4 finish eating and put fork 0 down. Also, process 0 needs to wait for process 1 put fork to put fork 1 down to the table, right? So this in this figure, through this figure, you can see each process just has the similar problem when each process needs to take the 2 forks, they might wait for a while. So you have to control this waiting action. You need to control each process to wait for a while, to wait until the neighbors put the demanded forks down. Also, if there obviously if process 0 wants to eat the spaghetti and the 2 forks, the fork 0 and fork 1 is right there, is on the table, then process 0 can just pick up these 2 forks and starts eating, right? So each process have 2 maybe 3, maybe more cases, because when the process needs to take fork 0, it might wait for a while. Also, when the process needs to take the fork on the right side, it might need to wait for a while too. So maybe they can just pick those forks directly, or maybe they need to wait for a while. And this just exactly the same actions we need to do for the down operations, right? So you can see, if we want to use semaphores to solve this this dining philosopher's problem, use semaphores to control the process to wait anytime it needs to wait. We just use semaphores before it takes the fork. Before it takes, when it takes the left fork, it just needs to needs to control, if it needs to judge, it needs to check if this fork is available. If it's not, it needs to block itself. It needs to use down operations to pick up the to on the to get this resource, right? So this is very simple. It is a very simple solution to solve this Danny philosopher problem. But you can see in the textbook, uh, if we just take no actions on the controlling of the two forks. If we just make each philosopher directly make them directly pick up the fork, then the processes, the philosophers, they can't how to say, the processes, okay, we just say processes, the 5 processes, they can't execute correctly, because you don't make the right control on the shared resource. So in the textbook, it just provides this solution, but this solution, you can see, it can only allow only one philosopher to it at any instant, because they just use only one one semaphore, use this one semaphore to represent the resource, which are 2 forks that the process needs. Okay, so you can check this solution after the class. We don't have time to explain it today, but we have time. We are gonna explain it in the next class. Before that, I hope you can check this solution and this solution. This solution is a successful one, but this one it's not so good because it has some limitation. And I hope you can check these 2 different solutions on dining philosophers. And if you have more time, you can check the new solution we just provided on the slide, which is not in the textbook. If you have time to check this solution in advance and try to understand it, it's very nice. It's very good. So before we explain the specific solutions relevant to the dining philosophers problem, I hope you can already read through all of these 3 solutions, and then you can you just have the you have the power to I believe you can solve any typical IPC problem, synchronization problems by yourself if you can understand this. Okay, so that's all for today. And the next class will be on this Sunday, right? It should be September 2026, right? So see you next time on 26th. Okay, that's all for today. See you this Sunday. It should be the afternoon, right?